In the summer of 1997, 19-year-old Rachel Timmerman was preparing to testify in a criminal case involving Marvin Gabrion. She hoped the legal system would protect her and her young daughter. Instead, both mother and child suddenly disappeared without a trace. Their disappearance marked the beginning of a disturbing murder investigation. Before we begin the full story, this channel takes hours of research and careful verification to bring you real crime stories that matter. We invest in tools, software, and time to ensure every detail is accurate and meaningful. If you support this work, help us reach 5,000 subscribers this week. Subscribe, like, share. Now back to the story. Rachel Timmerman lived in western Michigan with her 11-month-old daughter, Shannon. Family members described her as a caring young mother focused on raising her child. She had recently cooperated with authorities in a criminal investigation. That decision placed her in a dangerous position. Marvin Gabrion had previously been accused of sexually assaulting Rachel. Prosecutors were preparing to move forward with the case, making Rachel an important witness. Before she could testify, she vanished along with Shannon. Investigators immediately considered the timing highly suspicious. Rachel's family reported both mother and daughter missing after they failed to return home. Detectives interviewed relatives, friends, and anyone who had recently seen them. Early searches produced very few solid leads. The investigation quickly focused on finding evidence before it disappeared. Witnesses told investigators that Rachel had planned to meet Marvin Gabrion shortly before she disappeared. Police carefully examined his activities and questioned people who knew him. Although suspicions grew, investigators still needed physical evidence linking him to the disappearance. The search continued across western Michigan. Authorities discovered that Rachel never appeared for the scheduled court proceedings in the assault case. Her unexpected absence delayed the prosecution against Gabrion. Detectives believed her disappearance was directly connected to her role as a witness. They intensified their investigation into Gabrion's movements. Investigators searched locations connected to Gabrion while collecting witness statements and physical evidence. They also examined telephone records and travel patterns. Every new clue helped investigators reconstruct Rachel's final known movements. The case steadily expanded. Months passed without any confirmed sightings of Rachel or Shannon. Their families continued hoping they would be found alive. Detectives refused to abandon the investigation, despite the lack of immediate answers. They believed the truth was still waiting to be uncovered. In September 1997, investigators made a devastating discovery in Oxford Lake, within the Manistee National Forest. Divers recovered Rachel Timmerman's body from the water. She had been weighed down with concrete blocks to conceal the crime. The investigation immediately became a homicide case. A forensic examination confirmed that Rachel had been murdered before being placed in the lake. Investigators carefully documented every piece of evidence recovered from the scene. The condition of the body supported the theory that the killer had planned the crime in advance. Police intensified their efforts to locate Shannon. Despite extensive searches, 11-month-old Shannon Timmerman was never found. Investigators believed she had also been killed after disappearing with her mother. Her disappearance became one of the most heartbreaking aspects of the case. Family members continued searching for answers. As detectives reviewed witness statements and forensic evidence, Marvin Gabrion became the primary suspect. Investigators believed he had a motive to prevent Rachel from testifying in the pending assault case. Physical evidence and witness accounts strengthened the investigation. Prosecutors began preparing criminal charges. Police continued gathering evidence linking Gabrion to Rachel's murder, while searching for additional witnesses. Investigators reconstructed his activities before and after Rachel disappeared. The growing evidence pointed toward a carefully planned effort to silence a witness. Authorities moved closer to making an arrest. If you appreciate true crime documentaries based on verified investigations and courtroom evidence, subscribe and turn on notifications. Every victim deserves to be remembered, and every case deserves to be told with accuracy and respect. Investigators eventually located Marvin Gabrion after an intensive search involving multiple law enforcement agencies. He was arrested and taken into custody to face questioning about Rachel's disappearance and murder. Detectives compared his statements with the growing body of evidence. Inconsistencies increased their confidence in the case. During the investigation, Prosecutors focused on proving that Rachel had been murdered to prevent her testimony in the assault case. Witnesses described Gabrion's efforts to arrange meetings with Rachel before she disappeared. Detectives also documented evidence connecting him to the lake where her body was found. The prosecution's theory became increasingly clear. Federal authorities became involved because prosecutors argued that Rachel's murder had interfered with a federal judicial proceeding taking place on federal land. This allowed the case to move into the federal court system. Investigators coordinated evidence between local and federal agencies. The prosecution continued building a comprehensive case. Detectives interviewed numerous witnesses who had interacted with Gabrion before and after Rachel disappeared. Several statements helped establish a timeline of his activities. Investigators carefully compared those accounts with physical evidence. The timeline supported the prosecution's allegations. While examining Gabrion's background, investigators also looked into other disappearances connected to him. They identified similarities that raised additional concerns. Although not every case resulted in criminal charges, detectives continued reviewing available evidence. The investigation expanded beyond a single victim. Authorities considered Wayne Davis a suspected victim after he disappeared under suspicious circumstances linked to Gabrion. Investigators examined witness statements and available physical evidence related to the disappearance. Although the case remained unresolved, detectives believed it warranted close attention. The investigation continued alongside Rachel's murder case. Investigators also examined the disappearance of John Weeks while reviewing Gabrion's activities. Evidence suggested possible connections that required further investigation. Detectives continued gathering information from witnesses and historical records. The case remained one of several suspected homicides associated with Gabrion. Robert Allen's disappearance likewise attracted investigators' attention during the broader inquiry into Gabrion. Detectives explored possible links between Allen's disappearance and the suspect's known activities. Although prosecutors focused primarily on Rachel's murder, investigators did not ignore the additional cases. Each disappearance added to concerns about Gabrion's history. As the investigation progressed, prosecutors concentrated on the strongest evidence they could present in court. Rachel's murder offered the clearest combination of forensic evidence, witness testimony, and motive. Investigators organized every piece of evidence for trial. Their goal was to establish guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Witnesses prepared to testify about Rachel's plans before her disappearance and Gabrion's actions afterward. Prosecutors carefully reviewed forensic reports and investigative findings. The evidence formed a detailed narrative of the crime. The case moved steadily toward trial. Rachel's family continued seeking justice while mourning both Rachel and Shannon. The absence of Shannon remained an enduring source of pain because her body was never recovered. Investigators maintained that she was also a victim of the crime. The family hoped the court would hold Gabrion accountable. As jury selection approached, prosecutors finalized the evidence they intended to present during the federal trial. Investigators believed they had established motive, opportunity, and strong physical evidence linking Gabrion to Rachel's murder. The courtroom would soon determine whether the prosecution had proved its case beyond a reasonable doubt. Years of investigative work were about to be tested before a jury. The federal trial against Marvin Gabrion began with prosecutors outlining how Rachel Timmerman disappeared shortly before she was scheduled to testify against him. They argued that he murdered her to prevent her testimony and concealed her body in a remote lake. The defense challenged the government's evidence and denied the allegations. The jury listened as weeks of testimony began. I know you still haven't subscribed, so press the red button now, because the next real crime story could be even darker. Subscribe for more shocking investigations, courtroom mysteries, hidden evidence, and true crime cases that reveal the darkest side of human nature. Prosecutors presented forensic evidence recovered from the lake where Rachel's body was discovered. Investigators explained how concrete blocks had been used to weigh her body down beneath the water. The evidence suggested the murder had been carefully planned rather than accidental. Jurors closely examined the physical evidence. Witnesses testified about Rachel's plans to meet Marvin Gabrion before she disappeared. Prosecutors argued that this meeting was the last confirmed contact before her murder. The timeline placed Gabrion at the center of the investigation. The testimony strengthened the prosecution's theory. Investigators described how they reconstructed Gabrion's movements through witness interviews and collected evidence. They compared statements from multiple people to identify inconsistencies. Each new detail helped establish the sequence of events before Rachel's disappearance. Prosecutors argued that the evidence formed a consistent picture of guilt. The prosecution explained that Rachel's expected testimony in the earlier sexual assault case provided a clear motive. They argued that eliminating an important witness would prevent the criminal case from moving forward. Jurors heard how Rachel disappeared before she could appear in court. The alleged motive became one of the strongest parts of the case. Throughout the trial, investigators emphasized the extensive search for Shannon Timmerman. Despite repeated searches, no confirmed trace of the 11-month-old child was ever found. Prosecutors maintained that Shannon disappeared with her mother and was presumed murdered. Her disappearance remained one of the case's greatest tragedies. Detectives also discussed other disappearances that had raised concerns during the investigation. They examined possible connections involving Wayne Davis, John Weeks, and Robert Allen. Although those cases were not the basis for the federal murder charge, investigators continued reviewing the available evidence. Their findings highlighted the broader scope of the investigation. The defense challenged portions of the prosecution's evidence and questioned witness credibility. Attorneys argued that the government's case relied heavily on circumstantial evidence. Prosecutors responded by showing how multiple independent pieces of evidence supported one another. The jury carefully evaluated both arguments. Expert witnesses explained the forensic findings and the recovery of Rachel's body from the lake. Investigators described the methods used to preserve and analyze evidence. The prosecution argued that the physical evidence matched witness testimony. Together, the evidence strengthened the government's case. After weeks of testimony, both sides delivered their closing arguments. Prosecutors stated that the evidence proved Marvin Gabrion murdered Rachel to stop her from testifying. The defense maintained that reasonable doubt still existed. The case was then handed to the jury for deliberation. The jury found Marvin Gabrion guilty of murdering Rachel Timmerman. Jurors concluded that the prosecution had proved the charges beyond a reasonable doubt. The verdict represented justice for Rachel and her family after years of investigation. The case then moved to the sentencing phase. During sentencing, prosecutors described the devastating impact of Rachel's murder and Shannon's disappearance. Family members spoke about the lasting pain caused by the crimes. The court considered the seriousness of the evidence before announcing its decision. The sentencing hearing marked the final stage of the trial. The federal court sentenced Marvin Gabrion to death for the murder of Rachel Timmerman. He became one of the few defendants to receive a federal death sentence in Michigan, where the state itself does not have capital punishment. Years later, appeals and legal challenges continued regarding the sentence. Gabrion remains in federal custody. Although Rachel's murder resulted in a conviction, Shannon Timmerman has never been found. Investigators continue to consider her a presumed victim in the case. The disappearances of Wayne Davis, John Weeks, and Robert Allen also remain subjects of investigation, but Gabrion has not been convicted in those cases. Their families continue seeking answers. Justice begins with determined investigators and courageous witnesses who refuse to let the truth disappear. If you value fact-based true crime stories that honor victims and explain real investigations, subscribe, leave a comment, and share this documentary. The investigation demonstrated how persistence can solve even the most challenging cases. Detectives followed forensic evidence, witness statements, and timelines over many months. Every verified detail helped strengthen the prosecution's case. Careful police work proved essential to the conviction. Rachel Timmerman's family never stopped seeking justice after her disappearance. They cooperated with investigators throughout the lengthy legal process. Their determination helped keep attention focused on the case. The verdict provided accountability, though it could never erase their loss. The disappearance of Shannon remains one of the most heartbreaking parts of the investigation. Despite extensive searches, no confirmed evidence revealed what happened to her. Investigators continue to believe she was killed after disappearing with her mother. Her case remains officially unresolved. The suspected disappearances of Wayne Davis, John Weeks, and Robert Allen continue to attract interest from investigators and researchers. Authorities have examined possible links between those cases and Gabrion over the years. However, the available evidence has not resulted in additional murder convictions. Those investigations remain separate from the Rachel Timmerman case. Legal experts have studied the Gabrion case because of its unusual federal jurisdiction. The prosecution argued successfully that the murder interfered with a federal judicial proceeding on federal land. This allowed the case to be tried in federal court. It became an important legal precedent. The trial also demonstrated the importance of preserving physical evidence and documenting witness testimony. Investigators carefully built the case over time, rather than relying on a single piece of evidence. Their methodical approach convinced the jury beyond a reasonable doubt. The investigation became a model of thorough case preparation. Today, the Rachel Timmerman case remains one of Michigan's most significant murder investigations. It serves as a reminder of the dangers faced by victims who cooperate with the justice system. Prosecutors emphasize the need to protect witnesses from intimidation and violence. The case continues to be studied by legal professionals. Rachel is remembered as a young mother whose life was taken before she could testify in court. Shannon is remembered as an innocent child whose disappearance has never been resolved. Their story continues to inspire calls for justice and victim protection. Their memory remains central to the case. Investigators never stopped following evidence, even when answers were difficult to find. Their work uncovered the truth about Rachel's murder and secured a federal conviction. Although some questions remain unanswered, the investigation brought accountability where the evidence allowed. Persistence remained the key to solving the case. The Gabrion investigation reminds us that justice often depends on patience, cooperation, and careful evidence collection. Detectives, forensic experts, prosecutors, and witnesses each played a critical role. Their combined efforts exposed the crime and secured a conviction. The case continues to stand as an example of determined investigative work. Marvin Gabrion was convicted in federal court for the murder of Rachel Timmerman after investigators connected him to the crime through forensic evidence, witness testimony, and a clear motive to silence her before she testified. Rachel's body was recovered from a lake, while her daughter Shannon has never been found and is presumed to have been murdered, though no separate conviction exists regarding her disappearance. Authorities have also investigated the disappearances of Wayne Davis, John Weeks, and Robert Allen as suspected victims, but Gabrion has not been convicted in those cases. The conviction and federal death sentence for Rachel's murder remain the central outcome of one of Michigan's most significant criminal investigations. If you believe every victim deserves to be remembered and every investigation deserves to be understood, subscribe and join us for more fact-based true crime documentaries. Share this video with others who value evidence, justice, and the stories of victims whose voices must never be forgotten. If justice still matters to you, subscribe and stand with us because silence helps criminals. Every story deserves to be heard. Every victim deserves justice. Stay aware. Stay safe.